Welcome to Let's Talk Wellness, where we will be sharing insights into the world of mental health and wellness as we explore traditional medicine and holistic healing options. It's time to have new conversations about mental health. Join Mara James, the founder and CEO of the Hugs for Life Healing Center, as she guides us along this journey. And now, let's talk wellness.
Welcome to Let's Talk Wellness. I am your host, Mara James, and I want to say thank you for joining us for today's conversation. During Let's Talk Wellness, we focus on healing, understanding, growth, and spirituality. This is part of the Hugs for Life Healing Center, a subsidiary of the nonprofit organization called the Extraordinary Lives Foundation, where we are devoted to supporting mental health awareness and providing resources for children and their families. As the founder of these organizations, I have the great joy of collaborating with a team of amazing people to help bring healing to children and their families around the world. You could find all of our information at elfempowers.org. Now, let's talk wellness with today's guest, Helen Marie Diaz. Helen is a speaker and author of the Journey Reflection. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you.
It's so nice to have you here with us today.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So can you share with us a little bit about your background and how then you became an author and a speaker?
Absolutely. So I've been in the nonprofit social services industry for the last 30 years. So I spent 20 of those years leading programs. So I've always had this heart of giving back to others and giving back to communities and really leading programs that's really going to drive change in the communities. What I wasn't quite prepared for was the process of getting to the point of healing from my own adversity. So I am a survivor. I am one with lived experience as a survivor of childhood trauma, physical and emotional abuse by my father. I've long wanted to share my story, but that has been, a journey in itself. I just didn't realize how unhealed I was over the years. So I always thought that I had this great life, proving, overcoming adversity, having an education, a Latina, breaking barriers, that I was fine, that I was okay. But unfortunately, I had to learn, from in the most difficult way. So in 2020, I actually started this path of healing. I left a job that was environment that didn't align with me, and decided to do something different and really take the next step with Inspiration by Helen, which is my business. Yet I still struggled. And so it was a great friend who says, hey, Helen, you have this desire to be a speaker, you have this desire to share your story. And with this desire, maybe you should consider writing that book that you've been wanting to write, which is your memoir. So sharing my journey, right? And writing this book, sharing the tell-all story kind of thing. And so I tried. So through this journey, I really tried to write. And as I was writing, a lot of things were happening to me, still unaware. So 2020 was my journey to self-process and self-heal from my, those experiences of childhood trauma. So what I was doing is I was typing the scenarios and story. I was reliving those experiences, unaware and unknown of what was happening to me. So through that journey, I did manage to finish the memoir, but still thought, I'm healed, I'm fine. I was practicing mindfulness, praying to God, and doing everything that I could to self-heal and self-process, which we all know that in this world of healing, it takes a lot more than that. But I didn't at the time. So I landed a great job, took the job. What I didn't know is after a year of being at the job, that the work environment was a little bit of a trigger response, which I learned. So it was a high crisis work environment, and I wasn't aware of my physiological responses. I wasn't quite understanding. I've known I had this story. I knew this was part of my life, the past, the childhood trauma. I just didn't know how that was still, I was still carrying those memories and those burdens, and it was really taking a toll on me physiologically. When I did start to finally recognize a little bit of what was happening, I did start therapy. So the organization provided therapy or supported staff to receive therapy and also partnered with a therapist. So I had just started therapy and was just getting into the few sessions when those 4 months leading up to August last year, I was in trauma response. I was surviving, as I have my last 50 years, with fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So I was just surviving with those protecting me. So I was working long hours, people pleasing. And even when I had to be with my staff to really talk about real vulnerable stuff and deal with high level crises, I struggled. I struggled because here I am present, but then my mind is elsewhere. So that was a huge struggle for me. And then those 4 months were pretty intense, but I struggled to report important incidences and situations. So unfortunately, I lost my job. However, losing my job was the answer that I needed. It was like a saving grace, because even the power of praying, I'm still praying and I'm still practicing my mindfulness. I needed that. It was the push I needed to finally do what I'm trying to do now, which I have been doing, and through sharing my story. That day, I went to my therapist immediately. I was like, I don't understand what's happening. Why am I freezing? Why am I not, I'm present, but my mind is elsewhere. You know, what is truly happening? And that's when she says, Helen, you're freezing and dissociating. Like, okay, what does that mean?
Right.
Right.
And what does it mean?
And what does it mean? Helen, freezing, numbing, and dissociation are symptoms of PTSD. And it took me still probably 6 weeks into seeing her to really believe what she was telling me, because I did finally tell her, you know, if I have PTSD, she's like, no, Helen,
No, if.
it's not if. She's like, you have PTSD. So with her help through PTSD and doing the EMDR therapy, you know, trying to really process this, and doing the modalities and doing the homework she gave me, and doing a lot of the inner child work, which was huge for my healing journey, and practicing what she's telling me day to day, right? Because this is my everyday until I get to this path of being healed, right? So then I started also writing in between. Okay, so in between therapy sessions, I was struggling at home as I'm processing all this. I started writing. As I'm writing my feelings and emotions on paper and truly getting out these memories. And it turns out I was writing in a poetic form. So I've written poetry years ago, and over the years, but not really done anything with it. But I started writing this way. And when I went to my therapist and says, hey, I know I have this memoir that's on the shelf. I've not published it. Just doesn't seem ready. Perhaps I can do a book with the poetry. Maybe that will help others. And that's when she said, well, read the book. Read the poetry with me. And so we did. And so through EMDR therapy, I was able to read through each of the poems with her to process them, because without EMDR, I could not read that. I could not share those memories with her without my brain processing that, thinking that it's in the current time. So with the treatment and writing the poetry and reading those memories and reading the poetry, because of the EMDR therapy and the support that I received, I now can read them out loud and share. And also, I believe that those things are now in the past. So it's been a healing journey.
That's beautiful. And for our friends out there that aren't familiar with EMDR, it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And I've done it too. And I've actually done it via Zoom, where I would say something that happened to me. I also experienced traumatic childhood, and I would say it, and the therapist would say it back, and she'd have her fingers go back and forth, and I'd keep my head straight, but my eyes would go back and forth. And it's amazing how it kind of it's kind of like what medication might do to the body. It really like desensitizes and really helps you heal on that cellular level. So when you say something, it's not, when we think about it, it's not triggering us. And it's like, I don't know if it's for you, but for me, I could talk about this girl and it doesn't affect me. It's kind of like I'm talking about like somebody else when it was actually my inner child. Is that what you encounter?
Yes, and I did it through the device, the device. So I held the device in my hand. It was in each hand, and it pulsated. And
Mm,
at my speed and at my desire, how I wanted it to work with me, and that helped me, which is very similar to the movements with the finger movements. But yes, now as I think about the scenarios and situations, it's the past. It's like it's interesting in how the modality works, right? And how helpful it is. But I truly now can share a story, share an incident, an occurrence. And yes, I may get emotional. I may feel something because I'm still, I still have feelings, right?
and you're
I
human.
just am human, yes. It's wonderful to know that it doesn't feel like the present moment. So your brain truly processes it. And you're right, desensitized, where it's now in the past, which it's always been in the past, but it wasn't processed that way
Yeah, but
initially.
our bodies, it's amazing. Our bodies, our cells hold on to
Absolutely.
these memories. I've done a lot of EMDR. I'm still working with a chiropractor that does NET, neuroemotional technique. And it's amazing, like some of the knots I have in my shoulders. And we keep going back to that, 4-year-old traumatized girl with my being molested. And then 5 years old, apparently my mother had a manic episode, which I don't consciously remember, but my body does. And it's really interesting, like what's triggering me now, where it was in the past, then we release it. And it's like, oh, my shoulders can relax. And it's amazing. And it's painful. And the universe definitely pushed you into your healing journey. And during it, you
Right.
don't understand why. And, being fired was the best thing that could ever happen to you. Of course, in the
Right.
moment, it's really painful and hurtful.
It's
And that's
yeah.
great that you had your therapist that you were working with who already did EMDR. You didn't have to search out somebody else. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Her specialty is in trauma and EMDR therapy, and the fact that she was able to support me through that. And the organization continued to support my therapy for several months after I was
Wow.
let go, which is a saving grace. It is difficult, to lose a job, but I know at the end it was meant to happen. There was a huge relief when that day came, because I was like, oh my God, this is what I needed. Because of course, my father's voice was in my head saying, you can't quit another job. You're a failure. Those words were coming back to me. I was like, no, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to do it. So I literally was in fight mode. I was in flight mode. I was in freeze. I was like fawning. I was everything I can to survive, when it was truly not helping the organization and my programs and not helping me. So it was definitely a blessing in disguise. And for everything that has happened as a result, I'm very grateful. And now to be able to share my story with, everyone, and be able to truly, go on that path of passion and purpose,
Yeah.
and be able to share is amazing. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. And those voices in our head that, it's like, no, you can, and you should be quitting an environment that's toxic for you. Not,
Right.
maybe you were in the
Right.
wrong job. So it's so funny
Right.
having to like unravel those
Right.
stories and those voices that we were told.
Right.
Have you gone on a forgiveness journey?
I'm on a journey. I'm on that journey. So I know you and I talked briefly about this before too. So the forgiveness journey to me is, I'm still in the place of getting to healing. So I've had that forgiveness conversation with my father. So he did ask for an apology, and he asked me if I forgave him prior to him passing. And I said I did. And I knew that my adult self, my wise woman self, was ready and prepared to answer that, because I've been in this field and practice for many years. And he was very sick at the time. And I says, yes, Dad, I do forgive you. It's in the past. But I wrote a poem about that. I don't have my book in front of me, but I do have a poem about that. It's called The Apology. And I did what I needed to do at the time. But the inner child wanted to put up a front. She wanted to say, no, I don't want to. So I wrote that with the lens between my adult self and the child self. And that's what the poem entails. But for me, it's not necessarily, the word for me is finding peace instead of finding forgiveness. It's not that I don't forgive my father. I just understand his story too, that led, which is not necessarily forgiving, but I understand there's a cycle of abuse. I understand his story. And for me, I want to find peace with what happened to me. And I'm at peace with what happened to me. I still love my dad. I can dislike him for all the things that he did to me, but I can still love him for all the great things that we did together. So that's where I am with the forgiveness journey. I'm hoping to, yes. So I think it's very personal when it gets to forgiveness. People really want to reach that. And I want to champion them and encourage them to find, if that's what they soul desire is forgiveness. But for me, the word forgiveness is obsolete in my trauma story. It doesn't exist. It's like, it's, for me, my word is peace. If I can get to the point of being at peace with what happened, then I am.
Right. And what you said is so profound, having your adult mind and having that little girl, her little girl
Mhm.
who's like, absolutely not. And really like giving her the love and the attention. And we have to actually and I think everybody does, regardless of how big or little our traumas are, that we actually
Right.
have to reparent our inner child. I always say, like, I was given the parents I needed, not what I needed, not what I wanted, for sure. But now I get to reparent that inner child and be there for her. And it's so profound. And, as you probably experienced, like letting those
Mhm.
tears fall, because when we don't cry as little children, we think we're at fault. And those
Right.
tears hold toxins and emotions that we need to get out.
Right.
So
And
encouraging
that is
people.
what you just said is so important. And I think in those in reaching out to individuals that are really reluctant to getting help, but that inner child work is so profound, and it is parenting the inner child. I have different versions of myself that I can, like the 5-6-year-old self, the 8 to 10-year-old self, the 13-14-year-old, and my 30-year-old self. So there's like a huge gap.
Yeah.
Each of them are in my world, in this world that I created, and all of them, I'm embracing them. So I go in there and I support them when I'm feeling the physiological response, those effects arise and I'm feeling struck or stuck and maybe feeling depressed or really sad, because I still struggle with depression. I go to all of them and I nurture them and I parent them and I love them and give them everything that they need. I'm going to tell you now that process has truly helped me learn to love myself, because I struggled for years to love myself. And I think that's a huge important message, because some people I love myself, but they don't fall in love with themselves, because I had to love those different versions that felt unloved for so long. So my little ones, so I go there and love them. And I'm like, wait, I love myself. That also brought me closer to my higher power as well. So that got me closer to praying, got me closer to love, that I am loved by Jesus, I'm loved by God. So that has really connected those dots for me. And I can feel it now, because I healed her, all the stages of me, and learned to love myself and learn that I am loved by God. So those things were powerful through the therapy treatment that I received.
That is so beautiful. Yeah, definitely. My manic episode was definitely a spiritual awakening, which put me onto this path of healing and knowing that I was even, molested by my father. And it's funny because like during the healing, I hear God saying, like, I was with you during it. I never left you. I had, and that's like just such a powerful thing, because, especially when you go through trauma when we're young, we really separate from our higher self, our, divine, so that is so beautiful. Were you always, did you always have like a belief in higher power?
I did. So that's actually my memoir, my journey through faith. It's been for me, it's an interesting ride, because it's been in and out. Because growing up Catholic, I was, we're raised in a very Catholic family, but not like seriously practicing Catholicism, but going to church and everything. Growing up, and I don't know how to say, maybe family and friends, people that are Catholics, kind of punish. It's like, if you don't do this and that, God's going to punish you. If you don't do this and that, God's going to punish you. So there was a lot of fear with religion.
Yeah.
A lot of fear growing up with religion, but I always prayed.
Nice.
I remember always praying at night as a little girl. I don't remember praying to rescue me. I did, because it was my norm. Growing up in this environment was the norm. I didn't understand that it wasn't normal, right? Healthy, until I was in middle school. So I never prayed for anything outside of take care of my mom, my dad, my family. I had this routine in prayer. So yes, I've been in and out of my faith throughout the years, but I attend a Christian church now. And so I've stepped away from my Catholic faith for personal reasons, but I do believe in our Lord, our Savior. I do believe in praying and God. And I'm grateful for the church that I attend. I'm not as frequent as I love to be, but power prayer is still there. And I do speak to him, and he's helped me along the way. So faith has always been part of my life.
That is so beautiful. We're going to take a
Yeah.
brief break, and I can't wait to come back and have you share some of your poems with us. So everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back.
In these shifting and changing times, more and more lives are being impacted by mental health. The Extraordinary Lives Foundation, also known as ELF, is transforming the way people view and navigate mental health challenges. Their mission is to improve children's mental health and wellness and support families by providing educational tools, resources, and awareness events. ELF encourages families to recognize symptoms, overcome the stigma, and reach out for help. Through prevention, early intervention, and holistic treatment, we believe many of the big problems facing today's youth can be transformed within a generation. Extraordinary Lives Foundation is excited to offer the Hugs for Life Healing Center, growing a worldwide network of approved holistic healers and bridging the gap between traditional and complementary healing options. Visit the Extraordinary Lives Foundation website at www.elfempowers.org to find out more about their resources and events. Together, we can change the conversation around mental health. We hope that you're enjoying today's Let's Talk Wellness podcast. And if you have a topic that you would like us to explore, we would love to hear from you. Simply email us at info@elfempowers.org. That's info@elfempowers.org. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Wellness. I am your host, Mara James, and today we're speaking with Helen Marie Diaz, a speaker and author of Journey Reflection. Welcome back, Helen.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you continuing on. So I love your vulnerability and openness. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your childhood trauma and your healing. And now, do you have the book with you?
I do have my
Can you
book
show
with
it to
me,
us?
so thank you. This is Journey of Reflection. It is a collection of poems. It's understanding, overcoming, and healing, and discovering the power of healing from childhood trauma through the writing of poetry. So the writing of poetry alone didn't get me to this point of healing. It was all the components around the poetry, with the poetry, reading the poetry, therapy, EMDR, and this path has really moved me towards healing.
Amazing. Do you have a couple poems you might like to share with us?
I could. So I can read this poem only because we have spoken about my dad. And this was one of the very first poems or situations that I had to work on in therapy with EMDR that was very difficult. So when I started writing my memoir, I opened it with this story. And it was really hard for me. This was my attempt to self-process and self-heal, not understanding that I was surviving all these years with PTSD. So I was essentially at home trying to do this and re-traumatizing myself. So so now that I've written it into a poem, I want to read it with everyone. And this is the day that ultimately I feel that led to this trauma story, but PTSD. So I'll explain it in the poem. This is called Lesson About Trust. I trusted you. I believed you. You let me down once again. The open arms calling me back to be held in comfort and love was nothing but a lie. If you could only see the pain inside, the crippling anxiety, nervousness climbs, replaying the memory trapped in my head. I am 49, feeling like I am 6 all over again. I was a child of 6 with nowhere to run, but to your arms that I trusted to only be undone from trust and left feeling broken. It was that July 4th, hot summer, I learned to forever shut down to protect my little heart. You shamed me, called me pendeja again. You lied to me to intentionally hurt me so you can see me in pain as it fuels you and satisfies your rage. No regret that I can see, no empathy. Empathy was never in your vocabulary. You blame me for making you mad and for hitting me. Do you see what you made me do? Are the words you would say. all because I was afraid to light that M80 on that hot 4th of July day. It wasn't the hair pulling, the kick that bothered the most. It was your face, the look, the tone, the hatred you carried as you stared at me. The words blurted out of your mouth that will forever leave these internal scars. No matter my cries and pleading, no daddy, my voice was shattered, mouth zipped tight. I still had to light that damn M80. With your permission, my brother guided me, ignited, we ran, exploded with a loud blast. The last word you said, you see, you did all that for nothing, as you let out a laugh. This day ultimately led to lifelong struggles with PTSD. So that's a pretty intense poem. I read that at an open mic, at a poetry reading, and didn't give everyone a trigger warning. So it was somber. And at the end, some very great people that are poets came and spoke to me and were thankful, but it made them realize how much of their journey, their healing, they needed to start seeing therapy. So it was such a great impact that it had, even with the few people that were in attendance, that they're ready. So yeah.
Yes, I always say, if you could help heal one person, you help the world become a better place.
Right. And these poems, like this one, for instance, they were written through the healing process. So what I expressed to people is that this is how I was feeling to get out the memory, and this is how I was feeling, but at the moment, but not entirely how I carry these thoughts and memories in the core of my soul. So this is written through the adult and the child lens, allowing her to use her voice and her frustrations. And now I get to be the wise woman, the adult woman, to share her story, and then obviously read the poetry that we created together.
Yeah, it's amazing. It goes very deep, very heartfelt. I definitely could imagine it triggering people. I know there sometimes my husband, OBGYN, has connected me with some of his patients, and I share my story when I'm guided to. And there are a couple that I remember, they're both like, they shared with me, they said, oh my God, that happened to me when I was 5 years old. Not necessarily their father, but somebody else. And they're like, I never told anybody. And I said, that is too much for you to hold on. There's so much shame, blaming, guilt. And of course, there's always a dis-ease, whether it's emotional or physical, that comes out, anxiety, depression. I mean, living in PTSD will run our bodies ragged. We're not going to live to a ripe old age. So it's so beautiful. Encouraging people, to put their pinky toe in, not dive into the whole process.
Exactly.
Slowly but surely. We don't want to short circuit ourselves. Some people, they need medication because it's so traumatic. Some are okay without it, even just not always permanently, just to get them through the initial process. Right. That's what EM doing. There are a few other great healing modalities that can just calm the nervous system.
Right. Absolutely. And then the way the book is designed is, it eases into the trauma and then exits out into the path of healing. So I want people to know that those poems I wrote, specific memories about my father, were what I needed to get to this point of healing. And those are the ones I read. Majority of them I read in therapy to get through the process. And that one was by far the most difficult one. And at the end, I have a poem called Breaking Free, for instance, versus now it's like I'm on this path of path of healing. I wrote another one that I read as I was the impact speaker at Orange County's Blue Ribbon event kickoff for April as Child Abuse Prevention Month. And I read another poem called Loyalty and Hope, which was based on a bracelet at a writing workshop. And I wrote it based to support the inner child. So there's a lot of books on a lot of poems on the healing.
Wow. And I don't know how open, I'm just going to put it out there, you are about like the type of abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, or something else. Do you openly talk about that?
It's physical and emotional. The physical abuse was kicking. My father's justification was, it's the side of my foot, so it's okay. Hair pulling. I have one called Puppet, where he'd pull my hair and pull me around the house. I even have a picture where like a puppet, pull me by my hair like a puppet to get me to do certain things. Hair pulling, kicking, slapping, Yeah. And so for many years, oh, and there was the belt and the paddle. For many years, I minimized his hitting and the physical abuse because he didn't, I used to say, I wasn't black and blue. It wasn't that bad. Other people had it worse. I'm
Yeah.
okay. But it was because he is hitting, period. And, but for me, the most impactful part of the trauma was the emotional abuse. The emotional abuse because the way he would look at me and talk to me, and it was like through the lens of hate. And when you can feel that as a child, the shame and the humiliation. And I struggled when I was at my former job. I struggled with vulnerability. So me to be here to even talk to you for this long, this time was a whole different story a year ago.
Wow.
I
Beautiful.
struggled with vulnerability. I couldn't share, I couldn't talk. I felt shame. I felt humiliation because that's how I was raised with my father. And not being able to use my voice, not be able to speak up for myself. So
Yeah.
I created this version of myself that would just survive for the last almost 50 years and struggled to sincerely be myself and be my true self. So the emotional abuse was by far, and you'll hear this from a lot of survivors, is that the emotional abuse, if you, I mean, for me, I don't know if I'm speaking on behalf of everyone, but it was much more affected me much more, I think, than the physical abuse. Yeah, I can just say
Yeah.
that.
No, for sure. And you can't speak up then. Oh my God, if you said anything, you don't even know what he would do to you.
Right.
And it's not that he even hated you, he hated himself. Did you ever find out what trauma he went through? Because they say hurt people, traumatize people, traumatize
Yeah.
people.
I kind of have a glimpse of some things that he may have shared throughout my life, because I went into college and was in psychology, so he knew where I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and he shared some things with me, but it's his story, so I'm not yet, and family and friends, I'm not yet prepared to share. But I do know that he has his own story of trauma. I can share that he was an alcoholic, so he drank to numb.
Yeah.
But you're right. So through therapy, I learned that I may have been that child version of him. And so that he saw a lot of himself in me and didn't understand his own triggers, didn't understand his own responses. And unfortunately, it was taken out on me, but not me alone. I have a big family. I have 7 brothers and 3 sisters. So a lot of us, not all of us, I know, I have a big family. I didn't share
Wow.
that. So I have 7 brothers, 3 sisters. Not all of us, some of us really received the abuse. But everyone was witness to it at the very least, right? So, and yeah, so.
And your mom was around throughout it all?
My mom is my strength, I will say. She's, that's her story to share too, and I won't go into the details of my mom, but she has been, I can say that she has been my strength. She has truly instilled determination. She was my primary caregiver. My parents were in and out of the house. My father was in and out. Mom would always say he's out looking for work or he's getting a job. I think they separated a lot growing up.
Right.
Which made sense. And I recently did talk to my mom about my book. She read it. She's proud of me. She read the whole thing. My brothers, my sisters, they've read it, and we laughed about some memories because we know how to fawn. We're the jokers in the family, and we laugh through things, but it's the way we process things. But like I said, my mom is my strength. She's like by far one of the strongest women that I've ever known, for sure.
Yeah. And I had throughout my healing also, I was guided, like, even though my mom knew nothing about what happened to me, I had to forgive her. Again, not to her, just because that little girl was really angry. Like, Mom, why aren't you protecting me? You're here to protect me. And what's interesting is, like, for me, from my dad, I was the apple of his eye. He just loved everything. Like, he doted on me. And I didn't even recall my sexual trauma of being like a 3 or 4-year-old little girl until I was, 52 years old. So it's definitely interesting. I mean, on one hand, I'm grateful. So I think, but then of course it ended up exploding, and I experienced a manic episode of 57 because it was just time for my body to start healing. I mean, not 57,
Exactly.
48, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand that completely, because I think that's an important part of our stories to share with others that are hesitant. They know they have maybe perhaps a history of trauma and hesitant to getting help. It's going to show up at some point in our lives. whether it's in our decision making, because I can tell you now that my decision making throughout the last probably 8 years has not been by far the best. But the understanding about, decision making in career, decision making in relationships, decision making in even throughout my education, just with even friendships, it's always come from that place of wanting that needed to be healed. But because that people pleaser would come out, I was just not making the best decisions overall. And it's going to show up at some point. And and for me too, it showed up for me at 49.
Yeah.
Pretty intensely.
I mean, we manifest situations in our life. The universe says it. We don't consciously do it to show us things that we need to heal from our childhood. So being open to that. So I'm curious, what was one of your biggest ahas through your healing journey?
Oh, that's a great question. Biggest ahas. Well, definitely taking care of the inner child. The child that I identified mostly with, and she's the one on the cover. She's the kindergarten. This is the kindergartner. And not the aha moment was not understanding how I needed to be the one to really truly take care of her. So when we in therapy, we're asked to go to our safe place, and I go to the safe place with them, and I talk to them, and I talked to her. I had to imagine myself embracing her and loving her like I love my kids. I have 3 beautiful kids, and just giving them those hugs and kisses and just doing all that for her, but coming from a very I don't know, for lack of better words, I don't even have the right words, but I don't want to say just honest part of myself, but I just had to embrace her, just had to completely embrace her and love her. And I think that was the biggest aha moment for me. I was like, wow, really? And there were quite a few in therapy, I have to admit. And then the first time I did EMDR therapy, I was sharing this story. We hadn't started EMDR. And I do want to share this. I was starting to share it, and I said, I don't know why I'm still crying. I don't know why I'm still getting worked up. She says, stop for a moment. Let's do this. We're not going to do EMDR yet, but let's try this. Like, okay. I'm like, I don't know what this device is. Put it in your hand. Okay. Now share your story. And I'm like, but I'm not crying. It's okay. So I was struggling with not having emotions.
Yeah.
That memory. And I'm like, what's happening here? She says, it's okay. Keep sharing. I was like, oh, this is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I felt it, but I didn't relive it. So that was
powerful. We never, ever, when I first had my recollection of 52, the healers said to me, you need to keep reliving it until you have no emotion. I'm like, absolutely not. I never have to relive it. I get to revisit it and heal it, but never relive it.
Exactly.
And this is funny. So just last week I had a profound healing session, and the woman says, when you were really young, did you ever go to an imaginary place? And of course I was very young. I don't like 3, 4, I don't remember. And then all of a sudden I envisioned Tinkerbell, and she saw Tinkerbell. And I'm like, I guess I went to this beautiful imaginary land, and Tinkerbell was there, just all this stuff. And you know what? Whatever gets somebody through it, it's, it is what it is. And, for so long, we're in life, fight or flight, and, so, just trying to survive. And then when we get to go to that point of I could finally relax and start thriving, it's so profound and beautiful. So I just want to inspire everybody that's listening to both, Helen and myself. You can do it, and we're here to coach you on, and let the tears fall, because they're just going to take that and those tears and plant some new seeds and water them with the tears, and beautiful trees will grow. And Helen, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So they can go to my website. That's the easiest way. It is inspirationbyhelen.com. That's how I started this journey, and it just remained with that Inspiration by Helen. I'm really truly hoping to inspire others through my story and anything that I can do.
Yeah. And your book is on your website, correct?
It's on my website. So at the very top of the website at the bar, they can click to go to Amazon. It's easier but it's hard to search it. There's so many books on Amazon. So it's best to go to that top bar, or they can go to click my book on there.
Okay,
and they can
great.
go to the page.
And we'll put the link in the website and
Appreciate
the
that.
show information. So
Absolutely.
Helen and everybody watching, listening, I just want to remind you all that you are amazing.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Wellness. This podcast has been brought to you by the Hugs for Life Healing Center, a division of the Extraordinary Lives Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. If you would like to listen to more conversations like this, we invite you to subscribe to our mailing list at www.elfempowers.org to be notified when our weekly episodes are published. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to bringing you our next conversation on Let's Talk Wellness.